40 years ago. It's difficult to imagine now, but 40 years ago there was no such thing. There was no identity known as Virginia-Highland. There were people, you know, they called it South Morningside, some people called it Highland Virginia. There were no boundaries. There was no particular active group. There was a group that was around, sort of the Garden Club, the Highland Virginia Neighborhood Association, which, as far as I can tell, all they did was go around saying that they were in favor of building a highway through the middle of the neighborhood. Because of that, and some of us who were living in the area, and this started in 1971, at the beginning of 72 then, we decided to get together and try and do something. And, you know, the neighborhood here, you have to imagine looking down the street, right outside this building, going that way. You know, everything was being demolished. Where there is now John Howell Park, was going to be that diamond interchange that you saw on the map. There was going to be 6 lanes, 3 each way coming this way, and then narrowing to 2 lanes each way going north of here. So I mean, it was going to be a devastating impact on this community. And those of us that, you know, had moved into the community recently just thought, this is crazy. These are wonderful houses, the location is terrific. Why would we let this happen? The corner of Virginia and Highland, which is now thriving, and you know how, I'm sure you have an idea how rents are down there. Well, 40 years ago, it was 90% vacant. And for those of you that are fans of Moe's and Joe's and George's, they were there. They were there, and so was the gas station next to Moe's and Joe's. That was about it. By 1976, when we, what's that? It was a furniture restoration. But you could rent a space down there for about $70 or $80 a month, and in fact, we did it in 1976 when we got Todd Evans to run for the Georgia Senate, so we would have somebody in the General Assembly representing us. And we represented a storefront, which is now where Mitzi and Romano was, and I think we paid $85 a month for that to rent it, and they were real happy to get it. So it was a very different scene here. Politically, the world was very different. We take for granted now that neighborhoods have identity. We take for granted that neighborhoods have an NDU system, neighborhood planning unit system. There's input into the processes that determine what goes into the neighborhood. It wasn't here 40 years ago. In other words, governments generally did not recognize neighborhoods as being an entity that they had to listen to. And to the extent there were neighborhood organizations, they were generally thought of as being social clubs or garden clubs and things like that. So they did not have a strong identity, a political influence of any kind, and as a result, it didn't matter what they said. There was nothing in the process as far as planning, transportation, zoning that included neighborhoods, because neighborhoods didn't really exist, you know, on the landscape anywhere. That all changed, and it changed first with Morningside, and Mary Davis is here, and I'm sure everybody, is there anybody that doesn't know Mary Davis? Morningside was already organized before Virginia-Highland, and they were already starting to fight over I-45. We weren't here in Virginia-Highland. I was living around Park Drive, and I later moved over on Elmwood, and you know, our neighborhood was silent. So we decided, and the reason we picked the name Virginia-Highland was because the other group was called Highland Virginia. So after we'd been meeting for a while, and I was afraid that they might go down and try and steal the name, that's when I went down to the Secretary of State's office and reserved the name Virginia-Highland Civic Association in case we wanted it, and that way it would be reserved and we could use it if we wanted to and no one else could. So that's how the name became Virginia and Highland. The thing that happened with this neighborhood and with the organization of it was we came together, we created an identity, and that's why we had the first tour of homes in 1972, was to let people know that this neighborhood was here, that it had an identity, that people were actually moving here, living here, that it was going to renovate and it was going to be something. And it worked. Now, coming up in 1973, of course, was an election. And it was an election for mayor, and it was a very important election, because for this neighborhood, the question was, are the elected officials going to be with us, or are they going to be against us, which they had been in the past? They had simply not known we were here. So once we were organized, that led to the coalition building. And of course, the first coalition was Mary Davis, president of the Morningside Lennox Park Association. I was the chairman of the Civic Association here. Then we connected up with Inman Park, Virginia-Highland to the south. And then we discovered that there were neighborhoods in southwest Atlanta that were organized. So we organized a larger citywide coalition that we called the Citywide League of Neighborhoods. And we got involved in the election in 1973. And from then on, neighborhoods suddenly became an issue in the city of Atlanta. Maynard Jackson was very much a supporter of neighborhoods, and he embraced that as part of his campaign. And then for 8 years as mayor, Maynard Jackson was a champion of neighborhoods. I used to go to various meetings with him that he would invite me to as mayor, and he would explain that there are 3 legs to the stool that make up the community. One of them is the black community, the business community, and the neighborhoods. And he would, he preached that, and he lived that, and he backed us up on what we did. The NPU system, of course, then developed, because the question was, how can we institutionalize the recognition of neighborhoods so that they are a part of the fabric of the city? And so if we come or go, at least the neighborhoods and the recognition will still be here. And that's where the NPU system came from. So for me to be here tonight, I am delighted to know that 40 years later, the Virginia-Highland Civic Association is still going strong. And it's wonderful to see it. And the person who followed me as president is Bernie T. Kipp, who happens to be here.
When I left the meetings, I didn't talk as long as Joe. I'll tell you a couple of particular small things that you might be interested in. This school was slated to be closed one time by the Atlanta School Board. We went around and did a survey and came up with about 300 or 400 kids that were going to be coming here soon, and they decided to leave it open. We also got the rest of the property down here. It was going to be highway, and turned it into the school park. There were 2 houses on this side of the street, and we moved them up the hill so that you could have this whole block here, and that would be filled up there. Joe was talking about getting the neighborhood recognized. One of the reporters on WSB TV came to our picnic across over on the Joan Howard Parkland, where we were protesting against the state. And the state said the first time we went that they were going to come arrest everybody. And Maynard told them, bring plenty of buses, there'll be 3,500 people. And there were. And the state took a look and went home. But meanwhile, one of our old reporters on WSB that you still see occasionally started out to interview me. And he said something about Midtown in introducing me. And I said, this is really nice of Channel 5 to come out here and do this. And he got really mad. He shut it down and he said, you stupid idiot, this is not Channel 5, this is Channel 2. I said, you stupid idiot, this is not Midtown, this is Virginia-Highland. That used the idea.
We really need to actually get the few people that Lola and Carrie missed and sit down and it's thanks for both those stories, both of you. The memory's rich and a huge, it's not just you two and even your colleagues of that period that did it, though y'all were instrumental. It's been a huge line of folks that have devoted themselves and hundreds of hours of their time to keeping this association going for 40 years. It's no mean trick, as we know when you look around. We have a very small number, but we're very proud to have them here, of the folks who have served prominently in the Virginia-Highland Civic Association since that period, and we'd like to introduce them and bring them forward. We have a small gift for them. and have them stand up here, and we'd like to get a couple of pictures, and then we'll move on to the business part of the association. We're going to do it by decade, starting with Joe Drolet. If you will, just to stand right over here, and we got something for you. We got a gift for you here, Joe. Bernie Teacup, got to come back. Ann Taylor Balwell. Oh, she left early. Well, I'm glad we got to see her. Oh, it doesn't matter. You know,
I lived here in 1970, but
come on up.
I was more in love.
You'll be in the 60s in the next meeting we have. Kathy Harbor. Thank you. Thank you. Jennifer Chambers. Thanks for coming. Dennis McConnell. Nancy Hamilton. Charles Longley, who was here for a long time. David Cox. Dick Shanahan. We've crept up into the 90s, more or less. We're getting there. Wally Somerville. Amy Waterman. Debbie Skupinski. Aaron Gross is represented by Josephine. Joe, please. Great to see you. Billy Joe. Winnie Curry. J.D. Christie. Tinker Green. Barbara Touche. And the lead. Let's do it. Bob Coombs. There's Bob. Doris Betts. Steve Kushner. Head lead. And I'm going to admit names of people that are still on this board. And who else have I missed? And please, if we missed you, please stand up and come up here and be recognized. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to give a big hand to all these folks. We're never done with any of you, but as long as your head's up right, we're not done with you. There wasn't a lot that got past this group, I'll tell you that. Can we ask you folks, if you will, step over to the right where our fine photographer is going to take some pictures of you. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Charles Longley.